The floorboards bit cold against Elara's cheek, the rough pine catching at the frayed hem of her dress as she lay where she had fallen. Each breath was a shallow, treacherous negotiation with her body, a sip of air that felt less like oxygen and more like swallowing crushed glass. The pain in her side had settled from a sharp spike into a deep, grinding ache, a tectonic shifting of bone and bruise that whispered of things bent wrong inside the cage of her chest. "My ribs are already broken," she whispered to the stagnant air. Her voice was thin, barely stirring the dust motes that danced in the singular, unforgiving shaft of afternoon light, cutting through the cabin's grime-streaked window. Outside, the world continued. She could hear the heavy, rhythmic thud of Silas's boots on the porch. It was a sound that had once meant safety, the returning tread of a big brother who would shield her from a harsh world. That was before the whiskey eroded his soul. That was before their father died, and left them with nothing but this patch of stony, unyielding ground and a growing, cancerous resentment. The boots stopped. Elara held what breath she could, counting the seconds in the silence. 1, 2, 3. Sometimes he forgot. Sometimes the rage passed through him like a summer fever, breaking in a sweat of confusion and apology. He would come back inside with his old face, the one from her childhood, bringing her cool water and sitting in repentant silence while she mended whatever he had torn. But not today. Today, the silence outside was heavy, pregnant with a violence that hadn't yet run its course. The door scraped open. Elara didn't lift her head. She had learned the hard physics of survival years ago. To look him in the eye when the darkness was upon him was to pour oil on a fire. Better to be still. Better to be small. Better to become as inanimate as the furniture, letting the storm blow over. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." The words weren't shouted. They were spoken with a terrifying calm that hit her like ice water. She realized with a jolt that she had been drifting, the pain pulling her down into that gray, fuzzy place where reality softened. I said, "Look at me, Elara." The toe of his work boot came into view first, the leather scarred and stained dark with oil and mud. Then his hands hung at his sides, the knuckles raw. She forced her neck to turn, forced her eyes to travel up and meet his. They were pale, watery blue, their mother's eyes, twisted into a shape their mother would have wept to see. "You think you're too good for the work I give you?" Silas asked. His voice was barely a whisper. When Silas got quiet, it meant he had moved past hot anger into the cold, calculating cruelty of the aggrieved. "Think you're better than this place? Better than me?" Elara wanted to scream that it wasn't true. It had never been true. She had scrubbed the floors until her knees bled, mended his clothes until her fingers were calloused, and cooked their meager rations into meals without a word of complaint. She had never asked for anything beyond survival, but her throat was a dry well. The words died before they could rise. "Pa always said you had too much of Ma in you," Silas sneered, circling her prone form like a wolf inspecting a trapped hare. "Said it would make you soft." Guess he was right. The mention of their parents made something twist in Elara's chest, a pain distinct from the broken ribs. Their father had been hard, yes, but fair. Their mother had been gentle until the consumption hollowed her out. Neither of them would have recognized the monster standing in their kitchen. "Get up," Elara tried. She pressed her trembling palms against the rough boards, summoning every ounce of will she possessed. She pushed. A white-hot bolt of lightning tore through her side. She collapsed back down with a gasp that sounded dangerously like a sob. "I said, get up." His boot caught her in the shoulder. It wasn't a killing blow, not hard enough to break new bone, but it was enough to send her sliding across the slick floorboards until her spine collided with the log wall. She stayed there, hunched and small, and felt something precious inside her chest finally snap. It wasn't a bone. It was the tether, that thin, invisible string that had kept her tied to the belief that if she just endured enough, if she was just good enough, he would change back. That hope died quietly on the cabin floor. In its place, a terrifying emptiness opened up. "You can't even do that, can you?" Silas spat, the disgust in his voice thick enough to choke on. "Can't do nothing right. Useless." He's right, she thought, but the thought didn't bring shame this time. It brought clarity. "I cannot make him happy. I cannot make the pain stop. I cannot live like this. The light in the window shifted. The day was dying. Soon Silas would drink himself into a stupor, and the cabin would fall into the temporary truce of unconsciousness. But as she sat there, clutching her side, a whisper rose in her mind. It wasn't a voice. It was an instinct, a biological imperative screaming from the marrow of her bones. Run. The thought was so foreign, so dangerous, she almost pushed it away. But it rooted itself in the pain. Maybe there was a world beyond these walls. Maybe there were people who didn't use their hands for hurting. Maybe there was a place where a breath didn't cost a bruise. She closed her eyes, but she didn't let the thought fade. She watered it with her tears. Dawn arrived gray and bitter, finding Elara exactly where sleep had claimed her, curled against the wall. Her body had stiffened in the night, her ribs screaming a high-pitched protest with every shallow inhalation. But beneath the agony, the resolve she had forged in the dark had hardened into steel. From the back room, the jagged rhythm of Silas's snoring rattled the walls. He was deep under, drowned in the cheap whiskey that was his, the only true companion. Elara eased herself up. Every movement was a small war. She bit her lip until she tasted copper to keep from crying out. Her bare feet found the silent path across the floorboards, a map she had memorized over years of trying not to wake the dragon. Her hand closed around the iron latch of the door. It was cold, deeper than winter. For a heartbeat, she froze. If he woke now, if he found her here. But the snoring continued. She lifted the latch with the terrifying precision of a bomb disposal expert. The door swung open. The morning air hit her face, a slap of coolness, sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth. She had forgotten how big the sky was. Without the frame of the window to box it in, it stretched into an infinite, terrifying forever. She didn't look back. She couldn't. To look back was to turn to salt. Elara walked. The dirt road leading away from the homestead was pale and dusty in the growing light. She had walked it 1,000 times to fetch water, but never passed the bend where the woods swallowed the track. Each step sent fire up her side. The sun climbed, transforming from a pale promise into a branding iron on her shoulders. Her dress, torn and thin, offered no protection. The stones of the road chewed at her feet. By midday, Elara was less a woman and more a mechanism of pain and forward motion. She stopped only to lean against fence posts, counting breaths. 1, 2, move. The fear was a physical weight. Every bird taking flight, every snapping twig sounded like Silas. She knew he would come. He wouldn't let his property wander off. Losing her meant losing his punching bag, his servant, his last scrap of power. Late afternoon found her collapsed beside the road, miles from home, pressed against a sun-warmed boulder. Her throat was lined with felt. She had no water. Maybe this is how it ends, she thought, a strange peace settling over her. At least I am free. At least the sky is mine. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats, panic, primal and electric, surged through her. She tried to scramble into the brush, to hide, but her body had nothing left to give. She managed to drag herself only a few feet into the shadow of a stunted pine before her limbs turned to water. The hoofbeats slowed, stopped. Easy. Quiet now. A man's voice, low, deep, not the high, frantic pitch of Silas's rage. "Miss?" Elara squeezed her eyes shut, trying to will herself into invisibility. "Miss, are you hurt?" She heard the creak of a saddle, the thud of boots on the earth. The smell hit her then, horse sweat, old leather, and soap. Cleanliness. "I'm not going to hurt you." They all said that. But she opened her eyes. He was crouched a few feet away, respecting her space. He was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind into a map of rough kindness. His eyes were dark and held a profound, weary gentleness. "You're a long way from anywhere," he said softly. Elara tried to speak, to lie, to tell him she was fine. "My ribs," she rasped, the truth spilling out before she could catch it, "are already broken." The stranger's face shifted, a cloud passing over a deep lake. He didn't reach for her. He simply nodded. "I can see that. How long have you been walking?" "Since dawn." "My name is Elias," he said. "Elias Thorne. You don't have to tell me yours." The agency he offered her, the simple choice of a name, broke her. "Elara," she whispered. "Elara. That's a strong name." He looked at her, really looked at her, cataloging the bruises, the fear, the torn dress. "Someone did this to you. Someone who was supposed to protect you." She nodded, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. "They coming after you?" "Yes." Elias stood up. He didn't look frightened. He looked like a man who had seen storms before and knew how to batten down the hatches. "Then we best get you somewhere safe. I have a cabin, hidden, defensible. You willing to trust me that far?" Trust. A dangerous currency. But looking at Elias, seeing the restraint in his hands and the sorrow in his eyes, Elara made a choice. "I can't walk," she admitted. "I know." He lifted her with a gentleness that made her want to weep. He placed her on his horse, a massive sorrel gelding, and swung up behind her, keeping his arms loose, careful not to touch her ribs. "Lean back," he murmured. "I've got you." As the horse moved into the rhythmic trot, carrying her away from the road and into the deep woods, Elara allowed herself to black out. She woke to the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat. Elara lay in a bed, a real bed, with soft linens, not a pallet on the floor. The cabin was warm, lit by the golden dance of a fireplace. It was clean, orderly. One wall was lined with books, more books than she had seen in her entire life. "You're awake." Elias was by the fire, stirring a pot. He didn't turn around immediately, giving her time to orient herself. 2 days, he said, answering the unasked question. "You had a fever. It broke an hour ago." He brought her soup, rabbit stew with herbs. He didn't force feed her. He handed her the spoon and sat nearby, whittling a piece of wood, his presence a steady, unintrusive anchor. Over the next 3 weeks, time dissolved into a strange, gentle rhythm. Elara learned that safety wasn't just the absence of violence. It was a positive force. It was warm water for washing. It was food when she was hungry. It was silence that wasn't heavy with threat. Elias was a man of few words, but every word mattered. He was a healer of sorts, not a doctor, but a man who knew how to mend things: fences, tools, animals, people. One evening, as rain lashed against the sturdy logs of the cabin, Elara asked the question that had been haunting her. "Why?" Elias looked up from his book. "Why what?" "Why help me? You don't know me. You don't know the trouble I bring." Elias set the book down. He looked into the fire, his face aging 10 years in a moment. "I had a sister, Elena. She married a man everyone thought was a saint. I didn't see the bruises until it was too late. I didn't ask the questions I should have asked." The silence stretched, heavy with his old grief. "She died," Elias said simply. He said she fell. We all knew, but knowing doesn't bring the dead back. So now, when I see someone hurt, I don't ask questions. I just balance the scales. Elara felt the tears prick her eyes. "It was my brother," she confessed. "Silas. He wasn't always like that." "They never are," Elias said. "But the man he was doesn't excuse the man he is." That night, Elias began to read to her. He discovered she couldn't read. Silas had claimed books were for betters, and he didn't laugh. He taught her. "Knowledge is armor," Elias told her, pointing to the letters of a sentence. "Once you have it, no one can beat it out of you. It is the one thing that is truly yours." They sat by the fire night after night. Elara's ribs knit together, her skin lost its gray pallor. But the real healing was in her voice. She learned to speak without flinching. She learned to disagree with Elias about the interpretation of a poem and realized he didn't strike her. He smiled and argued back. She was becoming a person, but shadows have a way of stretching. November brought frost and a warning. Elias returned from town one afternoon, his face grim. He began boarding up the lower windows. "He's asking questions," Elias said, not sugarcoating it. "Man matching Silas's description. He's offering money. Someone in town talked." Elara felt the cold terror seize her gut. "I have to leave. I won't bring this to your door." Elias stopped her with a look. He grabbed his rifle from the mantel and began cleaning it with methodical, terrifying calm. "This is my home, Elara, and you are under my protection. We don't run from bullies. We make them regret showing up. He will bring men," she warned. "He is a coward. He never fights fair." "Then we will be ready." Elias taught her to shoot. He placed a heavy revolver in her hand. Don't think of it as killing, he instructed. Think of it as stopping evil. Think of it as drawing a line. They came 3 nights later. The moon was obscured by heavy clouds. The horses made too much noise in the brush. Silas's hired thugs were loud and arrogant. Elara! Silas's voice cut through the night, echoing off the trees. It sounded smaller now, less like the voice of God, and more like the braying of a mule. I know you're in there. Come out, girl. You belong to me, your family. Inside the darkened cabin, Elara stood by the back window, her heart hammered against her mended ribs. He's circling, Elias whispered from the front door. 3 men, 2 flanking. Elara! Silas screamed, his voice cracking with entitlement. Don't make me burn you out, you ungrateful little witch, after everything I did for you. Elara looked at Elias. He nodded. It's your choice. Elara stepped to the window. She didn't hide. She opened the shutter. I am not coming out, Silas. Her voice rang clear and strong, startling the night. You? Silas laughed, a jagged sound. You sound bold. You think that man can save you? He'll tire of you, just like I did. You're broken goods, Elara. My ribs were broken, Elara shouted back, realizing the truth of it as she spoke. You broke my bones, but you did not break me. I'm coming in. If you cross that porch, you die. Elias's voice boomed, deep and authoritative. This is private land. Turn around. Gunfire erupted. Glass shattered. Elara dropped to the floor, the revolver heavy in her hand. She saw a shadow trying to force the back door. She didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She aimed at the wood where the lock was breaking and fired. The recoil jarred her arm, but the shadow screamed and fell back. They're rushing the front, Elias yelled. His rifle cracked. Once, twice, calculated, precise. The firefight was chaotic and brief. Silas's hired men were bullies, not soldiers. Faced with armed, determined resistance, their courage evaporated. 2 fled into the woods as soon as the lead started flying. But Silas remained. Silence fell over the clearing. Silas! Elara called out. It's over! They've left you! I ain't leaving without what's mine! He broke cover, charging the porch with a desperation that bordered on madness, a pistol raised. Elias stepped into the doorway. He didn't fire. He stood like a stone sentinel. Silas raised his gun, aiming not at Elias, but through the window, at Elara. Even in the end, his only instinct was to destroy what he couldn't control. Bang! But the shot didn't come from Silas. Elias had fired, a single shot to the shoulder. Silas spun around, his weapon flying into the dirt, and collapsed onto the steps, howling. Elara walked out onto the porch. She looked down at the man who had been her tormentor, her jailer, her brother. He lay clutching his shoulder, looking up at her with eyes full of hate and pain. You, Silas hissed. You're nothing. Elara crouched down. She wasn't afraid. She felt a profound, distancing pity. I am everything, she said softly. I am the one who survived you. Elias bound Silas's wound. They put him on his horse. Ride north, Elias told him. There's a doctor in Cedar Falls. If I ever see you on my land again, I won't aim for the shoulder. Silas looked at Elara one last time. He looked for the fear. He looked for the victim. He found only a stranger with eyes like steel. He turned his horse and vanished into the dark. Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers. The cabin had been repaired. The bullet holes were patched, the windows reglazed with glass that seemed to let in more light than before. Elara sat on the porch steps, a book of poetry open on her lap. She was watching Elias in the garden. He was turning the earth, preparing for the planting. She stood up and brushed the dust from her skirt, a skirt she had sewn. Herself, bright blue, the color of the sky she now claimed as her own. She walked down to the garden gate. Elias, he straightened up, wiping sweat from his brow. He smiled at her, and the sun seemed to get brighter. I've been thinking, she said. That's usually dangerous, he teased gently. I'm going to apply for the teaching position in town. The school board is looking. Elias rested on his spade. Pride, naked and unashamed, shone in his eyes. You'd be a wonder at it. You know what it means to fight for knowledge. And Elara stepped closer. She took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his calloused, gentle ones. I was thinking that the schoolhouse comes with a cottage. But I don't want to live in a cottage alone. Elias went very still. What are you saying, Elara? I'm asking if you want to marry me, Elias Thorne. I'm asking if you want to build a life, not out of broken pieces, but out of new timber. Elias dropped the spade. He took her face in his hands, treating her like the most precious thing on earth. I have wanted to ask you that for months, he whispered, but I wanted you to be free first, truly free. I am, she said. He kissed her then, and it tasted like the future. That evening, by the fire, Elara looked at her reflection in the darkened window. She didn't see the bruised girl on the floor anymore. My ribs are already broken, she whispered to herself, reclaiming the words. What was that? Elias asked from his chair. Elara turned to him, her smile radiant. I said my ribs were broken, but my heart is finally whole. Elara's story is fiction, but the reality of domestic violence is not. Millions of people live in the silence of that cabin every day. This story is a reminder of three things. You possess an inner strength. Even when you are on the floor, the spark of survival is there. Listen to it. You are not damaged goods. Trauma is something that happened to you. It is not who you are. Healing is possible. You can mend. You are not alone. There are people like Elias, advocates, shelters, and hotlines, waiting to help you stand up. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please take action. Today, share this story. Sometimes reading about someone else's courage is the spark needed to ignite your own. Your ribs may break, but your spirit is invincible. Stand up.